So now we're going to go ahead and work off of two other concepts that are pretty easy to understand, and that is understanding how to work with vertical angles. So one thing that you need to understand is vertical angles actually are congruent angles, and congruent angles are two angles that have the same measure. So if you'll notice in this first setup, you'll see that we have two 60-degree angles. Those would be considered congruent. And I remember congruent kind of starts with CO, just like a copy. So if I were to go copy something on the photocopy machine, it would give me the exact same thing unless I chose to enlarge or shrink it, okay? So here we've got 220-degree angles. Even though they're facing opposite directions, they're still equal in measure, okay? So vertical angles are actually going to be working with congruent angles. Two angles are considered vertical angles if they are opposite angles are formed by an intersection of two lines. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. So what does that wording mean? Well, if we look at these two intersecting lines, the vertical angles here would be angles 1 and angle 3. Okay, and the key thing on this is understanding that that vertical angles are congruent. That means they're equal in measure. So if I knew that angle 1 was, I'll just throw a number out there, 130 degrees, then that means that angle 3 is also 130 degrees. I don't have to do any calculating. I know because they're vertical from each other, they're straight across and they haven't been split by another ray, that they're exact measures of each other. They're copies of each other. Okay, so now I'm left with angles 2 and 4, which are also vertical angles. How can I figure out what angle 2 or 4 is? Because I'm going to have to use some sort of math. Well, here's visually what I want you to look at. If I wanted to figure out angle 2, there's a straight line, right? Remember, a straight line is a set of supplementary angles, so they equal 180. If I know that together 1 plus 2, the angle measures, not the numbers, but the angles 1 and angle 2 equal 180 degrees, and I already know 130 of it, I could subtract 180 minus 130, and that's going to leave me with 50 degrees. Okay, now I could use that same concept to solve for 4, but why not use vertical angles? Vertical angles are congruent, remember? They're equal to each other, so those are also going to be 50-degree angle measures, okay? This will take you a long ways with working some geometry. I know that sometimes you're getting these on your STAR testing and they look so confusing when it's actually a very easy concept, okay? If you notice here, we really only have 2 angle measures. In all 4 of those angles, there's only 50-degree angles and 130-degree angles. So understanding vertical angles is very important for this process. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work through some problems working with vertical angles and congruent angles. So in this first one, we're just going to solve for x. So what do we notice? Well, x is a vertical to the 70-degree angle measure. They're straight across from each other. So if I know that this is 70, then this one is congruent to that. This would also be 70 degrees. Okay, pretty easy. If I asked you to find the other one, let's just name them. Let's say this was angles 1 and angle 2. If I wanted to find out what those were, once again, I can take and split this. Think of it as a set of straight lines. So here's a straight line. And these two right here are making that straight line. Well, here's 70 of it. Straight line is 180. So 180 minus the 70 would give me 110 degrees. Okay, so if that's 110, this one's vertical. So this is also 110. Okay, so working those vertical angles to understand that they're equal to each other. Okay, so here we have that red box in the corner, which means a 90-degree angle measure. So if we know that that's 90 together, how can we solve for x? Well, what do we know? We know that if you need to see it visually, 50 plus x equals that box, which is 90 degrees. Now, some of you might need to see it that way, and many of you are just going to say, I'm going to take 90 minus what I know of 50 and get 40 degrees. Okay, so there's a set of complementary angles because they created that right angle or that 90-degree angle. Okay, so I want you guys to try these three. So go ahead and pause your video, go through and solve for A, which is working supplementary angles, B, which is working vertical angles, and C, which is working complementary angles. Solve for X on each of those. Okay, so on this one, you should have gotten 95 because 180 minus 85 is 95. These are vertical angles, so I had to understand that this was a 90-degree angle, so therefore X is also 90 degrees. And here, this is a set of complementary angles, so I'm going to take 90 minus my 69 that I know, which is going to give me 21 degrees. Okay, so that's working with each of those new concepts, new wording, and understanding. Remember, the C, complementary, makes 90-degree angles. The supplementary S creates 180-degree angles. And then vertical angles are copies of each other. Those are those ones that are straight across from each other. Okay, they're straight across from the V part of an angle. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and draw something up here that I want you to go through and practice because sometimes they give us ones that are a little more complex. So if I were to give you something that looked like this, and I'm just going to randomly put numbers in here, so bear with me on this. We may get decimal answers, and that's okay. Let's say that I had this be 130 degrees, and then I had 2x plus 7 sitting on this side. How could I go through and solve, first of all, for what that angle measure is where the 2x plus 7 is? And they probably would put this in a parenthesis just so that you understood. But ultimately, they want us to solve for x. So what you would do is you would first have to identify, well, this is a set of supplementary angles. So I'm going to take what I know, 180 degrees is supplementary, minus the 130 degrees that I know for sure. Okay, so when I do that, that leaves me with 50 degrees. Okay, so that means that this side, this angle right here, equals 50 degrees. I know that the angle is 50, but ultimately they're asking for what x is when they give us this. So now I just have to go through and solve this concept. 2x plus 7 equals 50. So we're jumping back to chapter 1 when we worked with solving 1- and 2-step equations. What would I do first? Well, I already have x's on the left side, so I want to go ahead and get rid of the non-x's. So minus 7, we get 2x equals 50 minus 7 is going to give me 43. So now I'm going to divide by 2 to get x by itself, divide by 2. So if I take 43 and divide that by 2, it's going to give me, 42 divided by 2 would be 21. So it'd be 21.5 degrees. Now, that doesn't mean that this angle is 21.5. It means the angle is 50 degrees, but when we just solved for x, it was 21.5. So I could substitute in just to check it. If I put 21.5 there, remember this means to multiply when they're right next to each other. 21.5 times 2 gives me the 43 plus 7 puts me back at 50 degrees. Okay, so here they're just combining some algebra and also those complementary, supplementary, vertical angle concepts. Okay, they're just upping the ante, trying to get you to work at a little bit higher level. So good luck with this, and just remember, supplementary angles equal 180. Complementary start with a C, they equal 90 degrees. Vertical angles are congruent or equal to each other, and they're also across the V of a set of angles. So good luck with this one, guys.